so you'll get a copy of that. And then we will follow up with some links that we have and resources, so look for that. I also want to point out that there are closed captionings available. If you go to the toolbars on the right, the top toolbar, about midway down, you'll see the CC icon, and that is the closed captioning.
All right. So for today, our lesson objectives are to share why a culture of care is so important to today's student, to share with you what a culture of care is and what that might look like, and then how to actually create a culture of care in your classroom, some tips and tricks that you can do, and the benefits of creating that culture of care.
We're going to start with a survey. And if you go to the chat, there'll be a link. Click on the link, and it's going to take you directly to this survey that you'll see on the screen now. You shouldn't have to log in or anything. It's going to take you to another tab. And this is pulling up a word cloud. I see somebody started already. But go ahead and submit. If you happen to want to use your phone, you can just go to www.menti.com and put this code in that's at the top of the screen. And the question is there, think about the best teachers you've ever had. What were some of the qualities that made them so effective? I'll give you a minute to just put your thoughts in. You can put a word or two in each of those 5 fields. Yeah, definitely see a pattern here, right? It looks like consistently the top word here is caring. Caring, fun, approachable, compassionate, personal connection, sense of humor. Now they're getting smaller, they're harder to read. Trustworthy, kind, fun, approachable. You know, what are you not seeing here? Content expert, strict, you know, and still caring, passionate. That's a good one too. That was really popular. Yeah, so, you know, we wanted you to do that, to really think about your experiences in life. When you have a teacher that you really thought fondly of, that you felt had a really effective way of teaching, it was based on these qualities: caring, compassionate, fun. So we just wanted to give you a chance to reflect on that first. So thank you for participating there. We're going to go back to our slides.
All right. So I think it's important here to acknowledge mental health and mental health issues that students experience and how it impacts and affects our students in their daily lives and within our classrooms as well. Students can, come to our class not just as students, but as humans, as real people, dealing with a range of circumstances and situations and feelings. And we have all probably had that experience of having something going on in our lives, whether it be with friends or family or job. And it's hard to leave that at the door when we enter into another space or an event or something like that. So there are some statistics here from a study actually in 2019 showing, percentages of undergraduate students and how they felt with depression, anxiety, considering suicide, feeling lonely. And all of these numbers are very high. And I actually chose a study that was pre-pandemic because I think it's important to note that these numbers were really high even before COVID and the pandemic. And the pandemic, I think, has heightened these even more, um, where we feel a little bit more isolated, or we're not being able to have as much connection as we were previously. And so I feel like right now, a lot of people attribute mental health issues to the pandemic, but it's important to note that these existed prior to that, and very high percentages of students had these mental health issues and bring those with them to class every day, and it impacts their learning. This study also found that 52.7% of students reported that academics had been traumatic or very difficult to handle. So I just want us to kind of keep that in mind as we are thinking about communities of care today, and why those are so important when we are, trying to teach our students as a whole.
Did I do it right?
You're in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Today, we're really focusing on perceived caring, and that is, how do students feel they're being cared for? Do they feel teachers are demonstrating empathy, understanding, responsiveness? An instructor or teacher may feel like they care, and they may feel like they're demonstrating that, but if students don't feel it, it doesn't count to them. So we're looking at what the research says students say makes a caring classroom. And there's this mantra that we always say in K through 12 education. It's over here on the right. Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we've always known that's true in K through 12, but what was interesting, and Rachel and I did a lot of research for this, and looking at the research in higher education that says it's just as important for college students. In fact, it's almost hard to wrap your head around how important they perceive caring in the classroom and how that improves learning outcomes for them and their whole experience. The research that we've done, we're going to give you a list of resources and links and some books. And I just encourage you to look at those and to really look at it yourself to see how important it is, because it's really huge for students, especially right now, like Rachel said. So how do you do that? What does it look like having a caring classroom? And number one thing, you're a person, show it. Students really want to get to know their instructors. They're curious. They want an emotional connection. And it's so important to them, but how do you show that? So one thing that you can do is share hobbies, or maybe it's a series that you're watching on TV. When they come into class, let them know a little bit about you, let them see you, because they want to connect with you. Think about, maybe you've worked with someone in the past who you haven't had the opportunity to get to know. It's really hard to connect with people when you don't know anything personal about them. And then, maybe you find out, oh, someone has kids like you do. And then you find a way to relate, but you have to find a way to connect with them. And that's by being, showing them who you are in some way. I'll give you an example of something I saw. It was Valentine's Day, and I was observing a physics class. And the physics professor came in and he got right to it, physics, right away, didn't greet the class or anything. The students got right to work, and they were, heads down. Nobody was talking. No one was moving. It was silent. And then about halfway through the class, the professor said, I have something I want to show you guys. I want to show you what my other students made me. And he pulled out this homemade Valentine. It was out of red construction paper. It looked like second graders made it. And the students, they started laughing. But as an observer, I could see their bodies change. I could feel the change in the class. Students, they relaxed. It was almost as if they inhaled when he came in and started doing physics. And then they had a moment to breathe. And I admit that, after that, I looked at him differently, because I thought he seemed unapproachable. But just that little bit, made such a difference. So keep that in mind. I'd say also, play to your strengths. I know we want to focus on our weaknesses a lot, but what are you really good at that shows students this is who you really are? Maybe you're good at telling stories or jokes. Try to play on your strengths so they can see who you really are. And this quote at the bottom, we came across this quite a bit too. The student said, I feel more cared about when you talk about things that aren't related to the content. So it is really important to them that they see you as a person. The other side of that is that students are people too. Show them that you know that. Use their names. Over and over again, this came up in the research. Now, if it's a small class, that's easy, right? But I think you'd be surprised how many names you could learn. And we've seen professors learn like up to 100 students' names. I'm not suggesting you can do that, but there may be other approaches, such as, I've seen classes where instructors put a little nameplate in front of students to help them learn the names. But maybe you have a large lecture class. The quote at the bottom here is, it says, professors don't have to achieve 100% knowledge of every student's name. It's just the attempt that says, I see you. I see that this class is people. One professor was talking about how he approached this. So if a student in the large lecture asked a question, the professor could say, can I have your name? Oh, this is Kai. And thanks for the question, Kai. And when other students saw the professor using other students' names, they felt they cared when they saw them as people. See them. It's really easy to just walk in and start teaching, or to say, oh, we have so much to do, we got to get going. I caught myself doing this quite a bit when I was teaching in college, because I was running from class to class. And I just told myself, stop. When you walk in, just stop and look at them and say, good morning. How was your weekend? Let them know that you see them, that they are the most important thing. And that's going to make a difference. Welcome surveys are really important here too. And these are done in the beginning of the semester, where you can ask questions that say, again, even if it's a big class, I want to know individually who's in this class. I want to know your pronouns and your preferred names, and I'm going to work really hard to get that right. What are your interests or experience with the content? Do you have any concerns about the class? Maybe there are observed holidays that you should know about. But just that survey says you care, even if it is a large class. Are your policies grounded in empathy? I'd encourage you to rethink the strictness sometimes that we have. Obviously, you have deadlines, but do students know that they can come to you if they're in trouble, that you can make exceptions? What's the wording like in your syllabus? Like, is it harsh? Is it extreme? Is it not inviting? Think about that, so that students feel like they can come to you when they need to. And then every class, have a check-in of sorts. Maybe that's just the opportunity to give them a pause, a brain break. They are human beings, and as humans, like, we can only take in so much information before we're just overwhelmed. Maybe a think, pair, share, or just a moment to breathe, to say, we're changing topics here. Take a minute. And wellness checks. And that's something, again, that's going to say to them that you care. So here, for example, I've got a survey. This is just something from Zoom. You can put images in Zoom now. How are you feeling about next week's exam? This class isn't last semester's class. Maybe they're struggling. What if 80% of the students said, hey, I'm not ready? What do you do? Well, what do we need? Do we need another study session? What content is giving you trouble? It says, I see you, you're a different class than I had before, and I care, and I want to help you succeed. And you can do, maybe it's just a really bad day in the world. There's a lot of those. And maybe you just want to see how they're feeling that day. I have this word cloud here, and this is something that we did. It wasn't this fall, but the last fall, we had a online session for faculty who were coming back into the classroom, full-time, face-to-face. We were going to go over all the new technologies that we had and talk a little bit about the changes on campus. And I did this survey initially just to see how people were feeling. And this was it: nervous, anxious. Everyone was overwhelmed. And for me, that just informed me, one, rein it in, slow down and don't overwhelm people, but also just let them know, like, we're here to support you. We can help you. It's really helpful to know how they're feeling, and it might just be about a particular content area. So the surveys are going to be really important. And keep in mind, we are social, even though people talk about how they don't want to come to the office anymore and everyone's really enjoying some alone time. That's true. But we are social. And if you can give students time to interact every class, even if it is a big lecture class, give them that opportunity to connect with one another. That's what makes them feel warm and connected. One of the best ways you can do that is with immediacy cues. So these are just little simple actions that tell people you're present in the moment. I'm right here with you. I see you. Because it is easy to just teach and kind of teach, to the air and not really see the students. Some ways to do that: non-verbally, smiling and eye contact. I know sometimes we don't want to be told to smile, but students are saying over and over in these surveys, they want the teacher to smile, and eye contact is huge for most of them. I mean, we are teaching in a Western culture, but if you're really paying attention and you're really seeing them, you'll see not every student wants eye contact. That may be cultural reasons, or maybe they just aren't good with eye contact. Now, I have a colleague who never makes eye contact with me and never will, and that's okay. I can sense that. So if you're present in the moment and you see that, maybe approach the student or come to the side of the student. You see them and you're responding to what they need with gestures to let them know, like, I'm trying to communicate to you. Circulate, move around the room to say, like, I'm talking to each of you. Leaning forward shows interest. And then verbally, make sure you're checking in with them. If you're giving them an assignment, hey, was any part of that unclear? Any questions? Was that helpful, what we just did? Can we improve that in any way? It says that, you're seeing them, you're observing them. I'll share an example that was from a student survey that I thought was really interesting. It was a student who had the same professor for 2 courses. So one of the courses was small, and the student said, this professor was great. He was interactive, he was kind, he was caring, he was engaged with the students. I love this professor. But I also had him for my lecture class. And he said, this was not the same person. This person was cold and condescending, not approachable at all. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because the professor probably didn't realize that was how students perceived him in the large lecture course. And I mean, I understand it's different walking in front of a lecture hall, right? And you're trying to project it. And maybe the professor was just so anxious that wasn't really aware of how the students were perceiving him. So think about that. Think about when you walk into the classroom, can you stop and look at the students? It's hard when you're teaching, I know, because you get distracted by things, but think about how you can let them know that you're actually present in the moment with them.
All right, so we're going to take a moment to use some of the features of InSpace and do an activity where everyone will be able to contribute some ideas. So we're actually going to share a whiteboard, and on that whiteboard there is sticky notes available. So you can grab a sticky note and jot down some of your ideas. Please feel free to put as many sticky notes on the whiteboard as possible. Let me go ahead and, thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
So again, our question to be thinking about is, what are some ways that you show caring to your students? Or what is something that you've seen done in a class or another instructor doing that they show caring to their students? So please feel free to add sticky notes. The sticky note option is over on the left-hand side toolbar right underneath the arrow. So you can just go ahead and click on that and choose a color sticky note to add. So I'll give you just a couple of minutes to get some of your thoughts down. Yep, so again, if you want to grab a sticky note, over on the left-hand side of the whiteboard, there's a toolbar that has an arrow, a little square, there's another arrow, there's a T for text. So the second icon down, if you hover over that, is for the sticky note. So you can just go ahead and click on that, and you'll be able to choose the color, and then go ahead and start typing. So as people are jotting down their thoughts, one thing I see a lot of is checking in with students, both academically and personally, checking in to see how they're feeling. That is a big trend that I'm seeing. Following up with students, being approachable, getting to know students, what they're passionate about, what their hobbies are. Perhaps weekly check-ins. Cultivating and honoring trust. I see quite a few for following up with students. Setting a tone of openness. Showing students that you remember them, maybe that you remember past conversations or things you have shared with them, things that they have shared with you. Sense of humor. I'll give you maybe about 30 seconds to get any last remaining thoughts on there. Asking students how to properly say their name. So it's one thing for us to use their names, but and learn them, but to learn how to say them properly. having them write a letter at the beginning of the year rather than filling out a form. So Terry talked about like a beginning of the year survey. So you could turn that survey into more of a letter format. Being vulnerable, showing them that you have emotions and feelings also. Yeah, so if you're having a bad day, you don't necessarily have to hide that. Great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your ideas. We'll be able to capture these so that we can look at them later. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move into some of the benefits of building a culture of care. And one of the major benefits that we saw in the research was that it fosters a sense of belonging and inclusiveness in the classroom. So an inclusive classroom really refers to an environment where all the students are going to feel comfortable and supported, both intellectually, academically, socially, and that we extend a sense of belonging in regards to their identity and their learning preferences. There was a quote that I found that it says, students need to feel not only that their teacher and classmates know a little about them, but that they're also accepted for who they are too as a person. The first step in creating community in classroom is helping students to kind of drop their guard long enough to really begin to know one another and their teacher as people. And one way to do this is to use icebreakers at the beginning of class. That's a really great way for students to take a few minutes away from the content, to get to know one another, ask about hobbies, ask about things that are not related to class. Another quote said, students need to feel not only that their teacher and peers know them, but they have the opportunity to disclose themselves and establish trust among their peers. So we have found that there was great success with interactive activities at the beginning of the semester that kind of break down those barriers. Tara, if you'd go to the next slide. Some of the tips for promoting inclusivity in the classroom is to really invest time in getting to know your students. And Terry mentioned this before, getting to know their names and their pronouns. But that was one of the main things that we found in the research that students felt really made the other students in the classroom and the teacher know who they were and that they cared about them as a person. To provide opportunities for students to share their own experiences and their different perspectives, and to include course material from various perspectives and from people from diverse backgrounds. I think it's really easy as instructors, when we're sharing content, to think about our own perspectives or our own backgrounds, and those tend to be the examples that we share. But very much being intentional about choosing perspectives of minority groups or perspectives of people who may not be the main source of content, and really choosing people of diverse backgrounds to be able to share examples. And then using a variety of instructional strategies and assessment methods as well. So making sure that we're choosing activities that are going to allow as many students in our class as possible to be able to participate and feel like they're successful in their learning. So giving students choices in how they maybe complete the assessment, maybe having a couple of choices, um, very much with different learning styles. So rather than always sharing content during a lecture on slides, getting students to read various texts, providing different videos and audio, images that the students can use in order to play to their different strengths and learning styles. So one of those icebreakers or interactive activities that you could do at the beginning of the semester is an activity called the Class Bestie activity. And this is basically an activity that you could spend maybe about 10 minutes doing at the beginning of class. And the students find a partner. And it's important to find a partner that the students don't already know. They don't want to choose someone who's already a friend or someone that they maybe have another class with. You really want to make sure that they're choosing a partner who is new to them. And then taking some time to ask each other questions, any questions that maybe a best friend might know. Where is your hometown? What are the different hobbies or activities that you like to do? Maybe something unique about them that other people wouldn't know. So really getting to know them and then spending a little bit of time after that to then share with the class and introduce the other student to the rest of the class. This works really well with a small class, but if you have a larger class, rather than sharing out to the entire class, maybe they form small groups and they just share out or introduce their new bestie to a smaller group within the class rather than the whole class. So we found that relationship development is really vital to building a sense of community in the classroom, and it helps students feel secure and supported. Um, Go ahead, Terry, to the next slide.
Another benefit of perceived care is that it builds trust with students. Trust gives them ease. Trust is safety, it's comfort. Yes, we can learn from people who we don't trust, but trust is important to any relationship. So when they perceive that you care, they're going to trust you. What does it look like if a student doesn't trust their teacher? They're not going to come to you when they have a problem or a concern because they don't know that you would adapt your teaching to them. Are they comfortable enough saying, hey, I know, for example, I've had students stop by after class and say, hey, like, you are going really fast. I need you to slow down. And they trust that, yes, she will take that into consideration and I can come forward with any kind of issue that I have. They trust you to not retaliate when they do have any kind of concerns. So trust is going to be really important for them. One of the most effective ways to build trust is through displaying emotional vulnerability. And we saw someone comment on that when we were working on the board earlier. But this one is hard. Being vulnerable is hard. I want you to take just 1 minute and I want you to read this quote because I think it's so important. Just take 1 minute and read that. Vulnerability is hard because it's counterintuitive. I know when I first started teaching, I was teaching high school students. I could not be vulnerable with them because to be honest, I was afraid of them. I was afraid of losing control. I was afraid of my colleagues seeing that. I was afraid that if they saw any weakness in me, if they saw that I couldn't do something or I didn't know something, that they would just, attack me, right? And high school students are pretty good about that. But, one day I just looked at myself through their eyes and I saw this person that wasn't me. Like, I don't know who that person is, but that's not me. And I didn't like that person. And I had to just be brave and start taking risks, because that's what happened is I didn't take risks. And also, like this quote says, if you are pretending that you're perfect, that just sets up something for them, an ideal that they just can't meet. They want to see you as authentic. And if you're hiding everything, you really aren't being who you are. What else does vulnerability look like in the classroom? Admit when you make mistakes. Like, that used to be hard for me until I realized, well, they know you make mistakes. And if you try to cover for it, you just don't look like a credible person and they're not going to trust you. Um, I know one time a student stopped by and said, I like that you admitted that you were wrong. He said, a lot of people wouldn't do that. And I thought, oh, thanks, I guess. But he was really saying, if you're just honest with us, we'll trust you and we're okay with you making mistakes. They really are. Talk about your insecurities. I know that's counterintuitive, but maybe you struggled with the content. Share with them. I failed my first exam in this topic. This was hard for me. I had to really learn this. And that gives them ease to know that they can do it too. And then they trust that you're being authentic with them. Welcome challenging questions from them. Don't get defensive. Admit when you don't know something. Feel confident in that. This little quote at the bottom came from a student survey, and it says, "Tell us you care so we don't doubt that you're invested in us." I never thought of saying it verbally. Like, that, it's kind of hard. It's very emotional. Like, if you said that in class, but maybe they do need to hear it. Maybe you just have to tell them how much you care. How does vulnerability build trust? The research shows that students are more receptive and willing to make mistakes when they see the instructor isn't perfect. It builds their confidence. When they see the instructor is still learning and growing, it can help them identify with a growth mindset that they really need to be successful. A couple other ideas, quick tips for building trust. One, don't play favorites. I've heard that. I can't tell you how often I hear that from college students too. And I bet if you asked that teacher, the teacher would say, I'm not playing favorites. But think about it. For example, when I was having my teaching evaluated once, somebody told me, you realize you only talk to the right side of the class? And I said, I do, which is probably because I write on the board with my right hand. I didn't realize that, and how that might make the other half of the class feel, thinking she never looks at us. Do you let certain students monopolize the conversation? Do you spend more time with other students? Are you talking to one student before class every day? Those are things that signal, hey, this teacher plays favorites. Be reliable, respond to emails, be prepared for class, right? You know this. But the more reliable you are, the more they're going to trust you. Set boundaries in class. Use predictable class procedures. If you've ever been in a 4th or 5th grade class, they have procedures. Here are the steps. Here's what we're doing. Here's what I expect from you at the end of class. College students need that too. And when you make that clear and you tell them what the process for the day is, they just can relax. They trust that you've got this, that you're prepared. Hold students accountable for their behavior, whether that's talking over other students or monopolizing conversation or coming in late. When other students see you kindly and respectfully hold others accountable, they will trust you more. And then, treat them like adults. Don't give them stories about what other students did in the past. Just trust that they're going to do their best.
So that leads us into improving student motivation. So the research has shown that there's an increase in student motivation when the teacher creates that classroom, that perception of caring in the classroom. I found in some research here that when a caring relationship exists between the teacher and the student, that the students' motivation increases, and it really actually also increases their desire to learn and succeed in that class. And when students are motivated, they have higher quality learning and outcomes, and they have a greater conceptual understanding of content, and they're able to demonstrate enhanced knowledge of situations. And they also report greater personal growth and feelings. Um, so creating that culture of care not only improves students' motivation to come to class, to participate in class, to study and actually spend dedicated time and effort on completing assignments and doing well, but when they're motivated, they do better. They learn more, and their outcomes are going to be higher, and they are going to be successful in class. And in one of the student surveys, there was a quote from a student that said, um, if you care about us as students, then say that you do, say so. And say that you believe in us and that you believe we can succeed. And that was one of the things that I found as well, was that if teachers were telling students that they could be successful, that they could succeed, that I believe in you. You may be struggling, this content may be really difficult, but I believe in you. You can do it if you put in the hard work and the effort. I believe in you. That the students were more motivated and did better on their assessments. So there were a couple of different frameworks for motivation. There were three of them. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. I could probably talk all day about each of these. But I want to just briefly go over each one. The first one is the expectancy, value, and cost model of motivation. And so this model looks at three different things. Students' expectation that they are able to succeed. So they're asking themselves, am I able to do this task? Am I able to complete this assignment? Am I able to do well on this exam? And then students' ability to perceive the importance of engaging in this task. Do I want to do it? Is it worth my time? Is it going to help me in the future? And then cost or barriers that impede the student's ability to actually be successful. So what are those different barriers? And thinking through this particular model of motivation, it's important to note that expectancy and value and cost are not shaped only when the student comes into the classroom, but they're shaped over time from both individual and different contextual factors. So each student comes in with an initial response, but those are going to change and going to increase students' motivation as they move through the course. So with the expectancy, value, and cost model of motivation, when students receive feedback that their effort matters and that their skills can change, they can improve upon their skills, then they're more likely to experience high expectancy. And parents and teachers' expectations and attitudes of the students, those are going to have an impact on how the students see themselves and the expectations that the students have for themselves as well. And so that's also going to increase, and they're going to have they're going to develop high expectations for themselves. When students are able to connect with what they're learning on a personal level, it connects to their life, to the real world, then they're going to experience high value. And when students have a sense of control or choice over their learning, they're going to experience high value. When students feel unsafe or they feel perhaps uncomfortable in a situation, whether that be physically or emotionally, they're going to experience high cost. That's going to be a barrier for their learning. And when students have too many other demands on their time, they don't know how to efficiently manage their time. That's going to likely, have a high cost for them and be a barrier for their learning. So all of those things are really going to affect the student's motivation. And there are various things that we can do to help make sure that they have high expectations and they view the content as having a high value, and to help us limit those barriers in the classroom. Another model is the ARCS model of instructional design. So that's going to look at attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So attention is basically getting and sustaining the student's attention in class. Relevance is, making sure that the instruction is, relevant to their lives, making sure it's an enjoyable experience, and it's meeting their psychological needs, and that students believe that success is possible, having that confidence of, yes, this content may be difficult or I may be struggling, but it is possible for me to be successful. And then satisfaction of helping students really feel good about the accomplishments or the progress that they're making in the class. And then finally, the last framework for motivation is the self-determination theory. And this is going to look at autonomy, students feeling autonomous when they're given options in order on how to present material or how to take the final exam. Competence. So this is fostered when students receive clear and meaningful feedback. And then relatedness. So this is fostered when the students feel connected to the content, feel connected to their peers, to their teachers. These are all going to have an impact on whether they feel motivated. Terry, if you hit to the next slide there. So just a couple of tips for helping to motivate students. Giving verbal praise and effort, or giving verbal praise for their effort and their hard work. Really paying personal attention to students, calling them out if you notice that they did something exceptional, or if you notice that they had a really good thought or idea about something, really paying attention to that and giving them the attention that deserves, so that they feel like their thoughts and their work is really valued in the class. Providing informative and helpful feedback, meaningful feedback that can be used right away. Finding out what the learner's interests are and relating those to the content, and kind of intertwining those into the content that you're teaching. If the students, find some sort of interest and can relate to that, they're definitely going to be more motivated to learn that information. Really allowing students who master a task help others in the class. That peer-to-peer learning is really going to help the students feel connected to one another and feel like they have something to contribute to the class. Providing frequent reinforcements, and providing a safe place for students to fail and learn from their mistakes. I think that's really important, is that we're not looking for perfection from our students. And if they make a mistake, or if they share a thought during a class discussion, that's not a popular opinion, that's okay, that you don't have to be perfect all the time. It's okay to have differing opinions. It's okay to make mistakes. And we're all going to learn from those together. Communicating to students that you believe that they can meet your high expectations. You may have set really high expectations for your students, and some of your students may not feel like those expectations are attainable. So really making sure that you share with them and communicate that you believe they can, in fact, meet those expectations, and in showing them how to actually get there. Including multiple low stakes assessments. So again, having one or two really high stake assessments can cause students to have anxiety. It can be stressful. They may be unmotivated to study or do well on one high stakes assessment, because perhaps maybe they don't think that they're going to do very well, or that they're already not doing so well in the class, and so this assessment isn't going to help them. So including throughout the term multiple lower stakes assessments can help the students kind of push their way through. If they don't do very well on one assessment, it's okay. I can move on to the next one. I can improve. I can change my study habits, and I can improve my progress throughout the course. So I'm going to leave it there. We're almost out of time. So Terry, if you would move to the next one. We want to share that there is another session in this seminar series coming up next week, that our colleagues Elizabeth and Heddle and Caroline are going to be putting on. So if you have not already registered for that one, you can register here. We will provide the slides for you after today's session. Oh, Terry, you're muted.
Thank you. I just want to say, wrapping up, probably the biggest takeaway for me, I mean, Rachel and I, we have our own experiences teaching, we have our own beliefs, right? We all kind of feel like we know what's working, but the research, it was so impressive in showing how much these small things make a difference and how important it is to students. So again, I encourage you to look at the research. We're going to send you the slides. There'll be a link to the research that we have. Also, the link to register on the TTC site for the next session. And again, I want to thank you for coming today. And I thank you so much for trying out our InSpace platform that we're piloting. Let us know, give us some feedback. Before you go, Rachel, is there anything?
I know we are right at 12 o'clock. So if you have another meeting or if you have to jump off for something else, please feel free. But we will stick around for a few minutes if you have questions, or if you want to chat about anything. I know I can stick around. And thank you very much for coming today.
Have a great day, everyone.